Good
Erwin, what's going
morning.
on, brother?
Hey, man. Sorry to make you wait.
I'm not waiting. I'm chilling, man. I'm chilling. How are you?
I'm good. Good. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. You ready to dive in?
Yeah. Where's home for you?
New York City, born and raised.
Oh, beautiful. I love New York.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. I mean, it's definitely a place that you need a break from. It's very high energy, very, and especially if you let yourself get a little frantic, it can be frantic at times. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful place to be, though.
Awesome. All right. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. We're already recording. Let's dive in deeper to that question. How are you? Like, what's going on in your life?
Oh, I'm doing great and having the time of my life. I turned 65 this month.
God
So I've been
bless.
alive a long time, but I don't think I've ever had a time in my life where I've been more excited. I feel so incredibly alive. I just landed. I was in 17 cities and 6 different countries over the last 3 weeks. So it's kind of insane.
Okay. So I'm 30. I'm curious, what would you do differently if you could go back? And it's not a regret thing, but
Yeah.
if you were sitting across from Erwin at 30 years old, like, what would you be saying to him right now?
Listen. uh, I think what I would say to him is what I would say to anyone in their 20s: live a life of intention, not a life of obligation. I think when I was
Mm,
30 years old, and I know people are different, the personalities are different, their psychological structures are different. But for me, I didn't really give myself permission to pursue my deepest ambitions and dreams um, at the level that I wished I had.
mm,
I was trying to live a meaningful life. I was trying to do things that mattered, but I also had like a lot of voices around me telling me what I should do with my life and what was important and what I shouldn't do. And I feel like I wasted a lot of energy trying to make a lot of people happy who, in the end, I couldn't make happy. I and I think some of it was just learning to be comfortable with trusting my own internal compass and the direction of my life that I felt most created to live out. So what I would say is, the faster you can give yourself permission to live your life from intention, from the inside out, rather than a life of obligation, the more you will begin to move into life that, one, I think you're created to live, and two, that you will actually live without regret.
yeah. Can we break those two words down just to get some clarity here? Like, what is the difference between intention and obligation?
Yeah, well, it depends on, again, who a person is. But for me, a life obligation, I mean, frankly, in college, I became a person of faith.
Mm,
I was basically an irreligious person, and who actually wanted to do good in the world. I wanted to make the world better. I didn't really have a underlying reason for that. I just felt like that was the better way to live. But when I became a person of faith, it seemed like then I was bombarded by voices telling me, you should do this with your life, or you should do this with your life, and you should be a pastor, or you should not be a businessman. You should only do humanitarian work. You shouldn't be an entrepreneur. And and I had all these voices in my head that in many ways restrained me from just pursuing crazy ambitions. Like
mm,
I discovered I love directing. I love directing film. I love art. And I remember 20 years ago sitting with my wife, telling her, "Honey, I'm gonna redirect my life. I'm gonna spend the next 20 years being an artist." And she said, "Go right ahead," but she didn't mean it. And a year later, I had a film company and a fashion company, and I was working on designing clothes and on documentaries and different pilots. And a year later, my wife said, "Hey, we need to have a conversation." And I said, "About what?" And she said, "Suddenly, like, you're this artist, and you're traveling New York and around the world, and you're in fashion and film, and we need to talk about this." And I said, "We did talk about it a year ago when I told you, I was going to redirect my life." And she said, "That conversation didn't count because I didn't believe you could be successful."
oh, wow.
And I've always been a person just who dreams, and I know you're supposed to have focus and be focused on one thing, but I'm working on a graphic novel. I've been working on it for the last 3 years. It's a mythology out of the Persian Empire. I'm working with artists in South America, I'm designing a new line called Ghost Artifacts that's
Mm.
working on high-end, super beautiful men's, apparel. And I'm starting this internet space called The Arena where we can talk about big ideas. And I'm always going to be creating new stuff. I already have in my mind stuff I'm going to create in my 70s. I already know my next career direction, and I just keep those things a secret. And I didn't give myself permission in my 20s just to pursue insanely the things that I really loved. But I will say, I don't regret the life I lived in my 20s. I actually look back and I can't believe I did the things I did. I mean, I was insane. I lived an incredibly radical, dangerous life. I worked with drug cartels and gangbangers, and I worked, in the most intense, violent, communities in the United States. And I traveled the world into Damascus and into Pakistan and to the most dangerous regions of the whole planet. And I just lived a really fearless life. So I don't really live with regret. I just think I could have probably accomplished a lot more, a lot faster, and a lot broader if I had discovered it was okay.
Yeah, well, on the perspective of faith, right? That was your divine plan. Your divine plan was unfolding before you, living quote unquote dangerously earlier on, and now pursuing more artistic stuff. I love that. And it leads me to ask, like, this is something that I ask often because I actually struggle with this, and I'm the first to admit it. How do we accept like our divine timing, like what the universe, God, whomever, anyone that's tuned into this believes in? Like, how do we accept what's happening is working for us versus like against us or to us?
Yeah, I've always felt like the universe was leveraged in my direction. I mean,
Mm.
even when I was a kid, my brother and his friends created what they called the Lucky Erwin Club because they felt like that somehow I would win even when I shouldn't, that things went in my direction even when there was no rational explanation for it. And so long before I ever had a concept of God, I felt like somebody's got my back, and I went through a lot of horrible stuff. It wasn't that I didn't go through tragedy and trauma.
Mm.
I mean, I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. English is my second language. I never knew my real father. I have one brief memory of him. And, my mom went to work for Pan Am right after I was born, literally after I was born. And so I didn't see her for the first several years of my life. My grandparents raised me, came to the States later, had, my name is an alias. I mean, if I am the perfect storyline for massive psychosis and neurosis.
Mm.
And when I said the universe was leveraged in my favor, I don't mean that I didn't have bad things happen to me.
Sure.
And it's that I always felt like somehow something beautiful was on the other side.
Mm.
And even when I began to live my life with intention as a person of faith, I was 29 years old, working in the hood, and working with really impoverished people. My income was around $6,000 a year, so I was just crushing it, And my wife and I slept on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed, and I was working at this event just as a volunteer backstage, 20,000 people in an arena where the Dallas Mavericks played basketball, and the speaker doesn't show up. And then the backup speaker is on a golf course, not answering his phone. And then an entourage of speakers waiting, hoping they could be asked to speak. We're all wearing suits, but it was 20,000 high school and college students. I'm in the back just volunteering, wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. And the guy in charge comes and tells me he thinks I'm supposed to speak. So with 45 minutes, notice, I'm speaking to 20,000 people when I'd never spoken to more than 200 in my life. And those things just always seem to happen in my life. But I will tell you that I wasn't going to go volunteer that night because I was tired and it felt beneath me just to be backstage, just moving a lantern, telling people where to go. If I had not shown up to serve, I would have not been given that opportunity to speak. And I think that so oftentimes in my life, when it looked like the universe was for me, it's because I was standing in the right place by doing the right things, by serving people, by not thinking about myself, about just trying to be there for others. And I just, quote, always happened to be at the right place at the right time. And even this last week, I spoke to an event 350,000 will be the reach of that talk. And when I first spoke at that event 20 years ago, I'm in that city. I get a call at 3 a.m. At 9 a.m, the main speaker got sick. They heard I was in town, and they called me and said, "Hey, would you speak this morning?" I would have never been given that opportunity to speak at this global leadership summit with, James Clear was speaking there this past week, and, people like Condoleezza Rice speak, and, Tony Blair, and, Bill Clinton spoke there. And I wasn't the person on the schedule. I wasn't the person they picked. I never felt like people needed to pick me because I felt like I'd already been picked. I just needed to be, I just need to do what I need to be doing. And lo and behold, there I am. I speak in that event. It's, another dramatic shift in my life. And so what I would say is, like, I don't think of God's plan the way I think a lot of Christians do, where it feels like it's all like laid out and it's step by step. You just need to make sure you do exactly what God wants.
Sure.
And in fact, I think that's the opposite of anything that both Judaism and Christianity actually teach in the scriptures. Because in the garden, if I could go all the way back to the beginning, the first metaphor, in the garden, this is what God says to Adam and Eve. He says, "Eat freely." And there's only one tree that's a bad choice. Every other tree is a good choice. And so I look at it and go, God's desire for us is for us to eat freely, to enjoy life, to pursue adventures, to pioneer, to explore, to create. And there's only one bad choice, and that's the choice that demeans who you are, demeans who others are, and diminishes who God is. And I just live a life that's free. So when you ask me, how do I relate to God's destiny? I think God's destiny is about who I become as a human being, not what I accomplish. And if I focus on who I'm becoming, I can do whatever I want because I'm doing it from the right place.
So this is why I love having a podcast, because it's that perspective right there. Like, that perspective, that little mindset shift is such a beautiful thing. I mean, I'm born Roman Catholic. I grew up, I went to Catholic school my whole life. I was fed the Bible. I even went to my freshman year in high school. I went to what I look at as an early fraternity. It was an all boys seminary school. It was wild, so I'm fed that all the time, but it's that perspective that you just shared that's so beautiful. So I want to say thank you. That resonates with me on a really high level, but I want to take a step back here. It's hard to neglect something that you said. You were mentioning that you were making $6,000 a year. You're sleeping on the floor with your wife. So I want to talk about that. I mean, she sounds like a ride or die, straight up. If a woman is going to, if she's going to stay by your side in that hardship and ride it out with you, that is such a beautiful thing. And even before that, you mentioned how, you told her that you want to start pursuing more artistic endeavors. First question is, how do we start to embrace the changes we see in our partners? Because who we start dating is not who they're going to be forever.
Yeah, don't marry who they are, marry who they're becoming. And just, just even in terms of Kim and I, we've been married 40 years, by the way. So
God bless.
I'm a novice because I've only been married one time.
That's a good thing, though.
And but I'm an expert because I've been married to many different women in the same body. I always tell men, look, if you want to be married to someone else, stay married to your wife because she's constantly changing and constantly growing. Right now, while we're speaking, my wife is in Malawi, Africa, working with the former president, building homes, building schools, building opportunities for people who are underserved and don't have the opportunities we have. And we have this great relationship where she lets me create as long as she can serve the world. And so I was joking. I said, my job is to figure out how to create resources, and her job is to figure out how to spend them faster than I can make it. But it actually allows me to be incredibly generative because there was a time in her life my wife was probably giving away $500,000 a year, and then I lost my company. I lost like $10 million in one day, and my partner did something that was unethical and illegal. And I lost everything. I take $1 million loan on my house just to pay, finish all the projects I did not want to leave unfinished. And I had to fly home across the country and tell my wife I lost everything. But sitting in a little coffee shop getting coffee, I could not afford it anymore. And I looked at Kim and I said, honey, I lost everything. And my wife responded immediately and said, I thought I was your everything.
Oof.
And when she said that, I'm like, who says that? I mean, only Jane Austen writes scripts like that, and I didn't have as a romantic a response. I just said, well, I just lost the everything that finances my everything. And, she looked at me, she said, we've been poor before, and you've always known what to do. She goes, well, we're going to be fine. And she really just gave me a lot of internal strength. It took me 5 years to work my way out of that situation and, come back out ahead financially. And what's so amazing is both my kids came to me and said, hey, Dad, this had to happen. You were in partnership with the wrong person at this time in your life, and you're so loyal, you would have never ended the relationship. And so you needed this to happen so that you could actually move on. And I think really the whole going back, circling back to your thing about destiny and, like the universe, it's all about perspective. And when you only see the things that go wrong, you think the universe is against you, that God's against you. And when you realize that every opportunity is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to discover, and even to pivot and to be more creative, then you see everything in your favor. And I look back at that moment, and by the way, it hit me hard. I couldn't hold food down for 30 days.
Holy shit.
I lost so much weight that I looked awesome. And there are positive benefits that come out of these things. But what it did is that it restructured something in my mind. Again, I thought, wow, if I can lose 10 million or so and actually come out of that, rise up out of those ashes, I'm more resilient than I knew. I have more capacity to take on more than I ever thought. And it gave me more courage because I'm like, you can punch me and I'll go down, but I'm coming up before the count.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to realize is that life isn't really about that momentary success. It really is about the internal process of becoming a person that you can respect, that you can look in the mirror and go, I'm proud of the person I'm becoming.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that story because when you told me your wife's response, I had tears in my eyes and chills up and down my arms. And I'm like, you know what? I cry enough. If it's the first time I'm meeting Erwin face to face, I'm going to cry in front of him. But I'm glad you shared that. And I'm really curious to know what it was during that 5-year period that kept the fire inside of you burning, right? What was it?
I think there's several things, but one thing is I live a very public life, and I've always felt like my life is hopefully an inspiration to other people who are going through really tough things. And so when I see myself going through a really difficult situation, I remind myself, this isn't for me, this is for others. And if I can rise above this, it will help someone else find courage. And I think it was 7 years ago, I found out I had stage 4 cancer. It had metastasized. And I was so clear in my own mind that how I lived through that moment would have a tremendous impact on other people. And I can tell you, it was the strangest thing. I never felt any bitterness. I never felt anger. I honestly, I didn't even feel fear. And I mean, obviously there'd be sadness because I didn't want to not spend my life seeing my kids grow up and, spend the next decades with my wife, Kim, and getting to enjoy this beautiful world that we live in. And so it wasn't that there wasn't sadness, but I wanted to be so clear to people because I feel like there are people who say they believe in God until life doesn't go their way. People who say they have faith until faith is required. And
sure.
I want people to know, hey, God's a really good God. Me having cancer has nothing to do with God's character. And just because I'm living a life that's trying to honor him and serve people, it doesn't make me exempt from tragedy. It doesn't make me exempt from the hard challenges of life. This is what real life looks like. And I think what really helps me through those things is, one, I just love surprising myself. I had a 6-hour surgery to get that cancer out of my body. And I asked the surgeon the moment I woke up, what's the fastest anyone's ever recovered from this and gotten back on a basketball court? And he goes, well, there's not really like a world's record for that. I said, well, then that's good because I got it. And,
Nah.
you know, 30 days, I think it was, after surgery, I was back on a basketball court.
Mm.
And, the holes in my stomach were still not fully healed. So I was bleeding while I was playing. And but my 3-point shot was dropping, so I knew the universe was for me. And um, and so I think some of it is I just love challenging myself, not for anyone else. So when I go through a massive financial crisis, or when I lose a company or something like that. And by the way, we lost the company when it was making the most money and when it was doing so well. And I didn't sue my partner, even though I could have come out of it really, really well. And because my money has never in my mind been my end game. Like I just don't care about money. It
Right.
just has never been my goal. I want to live a life of meaning. I want to live a life where I can make the greatest impact on other people's lives possible. And I want to have fun while I'm doing it. And that's what they couldn't steal from me. And somebody can take all your money. They can take all your assets, but they cannot take who you are. And I remember I coach a lot of like high-end people, people in the world of sports and fashion and music industry and business world. And, but I only really almost like coach one-on-one. I only coach geniuses, people who are really extraordinary in their field. And I remember sitting down with one guy because he had lost $1 billion, and it was pretty like shaken up. And I said, when you started, how much money did you have? And he said, well, none. And I said, all right, so when you started, how many investors did you have? He goes, none. I said, all right, so you started with nothing and built $1 billion empire. So now you have $1 billion worth of experience. So you're actually not starting from where you were. You've had $1 billion of investment in your life. If you could do this with nothing, imagine how much you can do with all of this. And I think that's like, to me, the mindset is that if you keep growing, no one can take that from you. Like you cannot take everything from me and leave me in a deficit, because all those things have taught me and grown me and built me.
I love that. That's powerful. On the topic of, how I just asked you, like, what kept the fire burning? I'm curious, what's your advice for the people that feel like their fire isn't even lit? Like, what's your advice for them to get that fire lit and then burning?
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing to transfer into a person is like determination, that passion, that drive. When I coach people, I mean, frankly, I kind of coach people who already have a lot of drive. I coach people who have so much drive, they've almost set themselves on fire. And the reason is that people that do not have drive do not need coaching, because there's nothing to coach. What you need to do if you don't have drive, if you don't have that fire, is you need to get around people who have fire. And you need to just suck it up and be around people who make you feel like you're underachieving. Because when you get around people with fire, that's what gives you fire. And it's sort of the whole concept with coals. When coals are separated, they all go out. But when you move them together, they all add heat to each other. And so I would say, find something you care about, even if it's the smallest thing. Just find something that you care about besides yourself. And then begin to give whatever time you have, even if it's discretionary time, even if it's time after work, even if it's you hate your job, find something that really brings meaning to your life and begin to fuel that fire, begin to fuel that passion. And that will begin to burn in you, because passion, urgency, drive, that's not something anyone else can give you. I spent at least a decade working with the urban poor. And one of the things that I just had to come to grips with is that, because when I first went, I was a high idealist. And I believed in some sense that it's the institution that's holding everyone down. It's the man, and I was like, I mean, I've always been a little bit of an anarchist. And so I just want to destroy every system. And, I'm going to bring down the man. And if I'm the man, I'm going to bring myself down, And, and I thought all people need is an opportunity. But what I discovered working with people in poverty is that you can give people opportunity, but you cannot give them determination. And so what you want to do is you want to find people who already have determination. They're just hitting walls, that they don't have the same access that you have, the same opportunities that you have. And when you find a person with determination, they take full opportunity of that opportunity that you give them. And I think that's true for me. I mean, I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. I could have 1,000 reasons why I've never achieved in my entire life. I was a straight D student first to 12th grade. I didn't go to college right away. I was working construction. I worked as a carpenter. I worked as I worked as a pizza cook. I flipped burgers. I did I was a lumberjack. I mean, I was a librarian. Every job that you could get without qualifications, that was me. It would have been very easy to go, oh, life was unfair. Life is unfair. And if you have determination, it'll be unfair in your direction.
I love that. So you talk about how the people you coach almost set themselves on fire because of all of the drive they have, right? So we're on the flip side of it. We just talked about the people that might not have the drive, might not have that fire lit. But you lead me to ask, do we need to contain our fire?
Well, it depends on what you mean by contain.
Okay.
You do need to contain it if it's like a forest fire and it's just consuming everything indiscriminately.
Yeah.
But you don't want to contain it like a fireplace and become domesticated. And you want to direct your fire, and you want to direct your ambition, and you want to make sure that the motivation behind that fire is pure. And so a huge part of it is, I mean, I remember the first time I spoke at this group called the 100 Million Mastermind. It's a very interesting self-description for these people, right? And I remember the first time I talked to them, I said, hey, I'm not going to tell you how to make more money. I'm going to tell you how not to die alone. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening is there's so many, mostly men, who are so driven to make $10 million, $50 million, $100 million. They're willing to make it at the cost of everything in their life, their relationships, their character, and really their future. Yeah, I think it's about 75% of NFL athletes, when they finish professional football, are completely bankrupt.
Yeah.
And, at least 50% of them 2 years after are divorced or bankrupt or drug addicted or dead. And because I've worked with probably over 500 to 1,000, pro athletes speaking into their lives. And one of the great challenges is that when you have talent at an early age, it is an incredible curse. Because when you have talent, people build external structures to optimize your talent for their benefit. And then once that talent is no longer essential, they remove those external structures and you have no internal structures for success. And so what can be deceptive is when you look at a person who has a lot of fire and they have huge success, you may think that they have all the internal structures that will give them sustained success for the rest of their life. It isn't true. Most of the structures are external. And inside, there's a house fire where everything is being destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. And I always appreciate when I can banter with someone in metaphor. And we're going back and forth on that fire right there. So
I was going to give you another metaphor because when I was in high school, out of high school, I was still living at home, and my mom, I was just drifting, says, you need to go find a real job. So I had saved so much money. I started my own little business when I was around like 12 years old, my own bank account. I saved an immense amount of money through high school. I bought my car cash. And my family does not come from wealth. My family comes from, you spend $10 more than you make, kind of family. But I was really good with money. And so I didn't have to work when I finished high school. So I took a little break, and my mom was done with me because I just had no direction, no purpose in my life. She goes, you need to have a job by tomorrow or you're out of the house. And so I slept in my car in freezing cold North Carolina. And I thought, this is not going to work. And, so I went and got a job at a hamburger shop. Got up early the next morning to go to the hamburger shop. And our house had an electrical explosion, and the house caught on fire,
Oh, shit.
consumed from the inside out about 15 minutes after I left the house. And they didn't even know if I was in the house when the house went up. And so a couple of things for that metaphor. One, if I had not decided to go to work, I would have been killed. I would have been consumed by a fire because I was so lazy. I would have still been in bed asleep because I was so depressed and so despondent, had no purpose in my life, was just drifting. I would have literally burned up in my sleep. But the flip side of that is that the house was a great house, except it had an electronic failure behind the refrigerator in the kitchen. And that's the way most lives are consumed. It's the neglect of the small things that are behind the walls that actually consume your entire life.
That is a powerful story. That is powerful. I have to ask you from a faith perspective, what does it mean to you when you look back at that and you're like, you know what, I'm still here, but there was a chance that I wouldn't be here? Like, what does that mean to you?
Matt, in that year before I actually became a person of faith, there were like 5 times I should have been dead. I fell off of a 4-story building and never hit the ground. And I'll let you figure out how that happened.
I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, wait, what do you mean you never hit the ground?
I got hit head on by a car running across the highway, was paralyzed from the waist down. I had this series of events at the age of 19, broke my neck. Just of injuries that were catastrophic. And I remember when I fell off that gym, I was working construction, and I went up a ladder, it flipped on the 4th floor, dropped me 4 stories. On the way down, I just reached back with my left hand without seeing, and I happened to grab a scaffold. And instead of tearing out my rotator cuff, I just swung there in the air, climbed my way back up the scaffold to the top of the planks, where full-grown men were paralyzed, leaning back against the wall because they watched this guy drop down to die and then climb back up.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm on top of these wooden planks, bouncing up and down, going, I can't die. I can't die. I can't die. I actually felt it in that moment. I think there's something trying to kill me. And if there's something that won't let me die, which, by the way, made me really open to the possibility of God. And that's the journey that actually brought me to a faith in Jesus Christ. Was I felt like someone was keeping me alive because there was a purpose for my life that I had not yet discovered, that was waiting for me. And, I ended up becoming a philosopher. I begged my way into university. I became a philosophy student. I had, after 1 year, 3 different universities offered me scholarships in philosophy. And because of work I did on Socratic thought and economic development. And I was searching, reading Marcus Aurelius and reading Aristotle and reading Plato and, understanding the concept of Socrates, because he actually never wrote anything, but Plato wrote his works, and reading Hume and Blake and Descartes and Locke, and I just devoured everything in modern history, trying to search for meaning in my life. And it wasn't because I suddenly became an intellectual. I was desperate to know if life actually mattered, if my life actually mattered. And I actually discounted Christianity. I laughed at it and said, there's just no reasonable human being who would ever believe this. And I was born Roman Catholic as well. So it was like, I'm like, hey, I know the emptiness of this. So there's no way I'm going to ever be conned into believing this. And
right.
And yet, eventually the message of Jesus just started antagonizing me. It's the only way I can think of it. It's like, it was just irritating me. And as I looked at world religions and I looked at philosophies and I realized every religion has this in common. They tell you what you need to do to get to wherever you want to go. this is what you need to do to get to God. This is what you need to do to get to nirvana. This is what you need to do to get to enlightenment. This is what you need to do to get to transcendence. This is what you need to do to get forgiveness. And I thought, man, if there's a God out there, it can't be like this. He can't be sitting on top of a mountain going, if you climb up here, you get to have a relationship with me.
Right.
And then I hear the message of Jesus going, it's not about what you do to get to God, because you can't do enough to get to God. It's what God does to get to you. And just understanding the fundamental nature of love, just understanding the fundamental nature of love. I said, whoever's more powerful is the one that has to take initiative. Whoever's more powerful is the one that has to make the breakthrough. And so it made sense to me. If there was a God, he would be the one that acted in history. And if there was a way to God, if there was a God on the other side of this, he would be the one searching for me. And that's why the message of Jesus made so much sense to me, because the message of Jesus is not what you need to do to get to God, but what God did to get to you. And that Jesus, through his crucifixion and resurrection, removes every obstacle between us and love, every obstacle between us and forgiveness, removes every obstacle between us and fulfillment. And I thought, okay, I'm good accepting that maybe nothing is real. It's not the best solution, but I can live with that.
Mm.
But if there is a God, this is the only narrative that makes sense. And so I just took a huge risk. I wish I could say it was like an intellectual thing. And, I did all the Bible studies I did, and I've never seen a Bible in my entire life. I just basically said, God, if you're out there, I'm in. And that's why I think we almost like complicate things. It was very
definitely
simple.
do.
I just basically just said, God, if you're out there, I'm in. And Jesus, if you're God, I'm going to let you make that clear to me.
Mm.
And, 40 years later, I'm still in my back house going, I can't believe I believe this. And, but it's changed my life.
That it most definitely has. I haven't lived it, but from hearing your stories, it's an absolutely beautiful thing. I only have you for a few more minutes, so I'm going to try and squeeze a couple more questions out of you. I mean, you've given us a ton already, so I don't know where this could potentially go, but it's something that I ask because it's my job. What's a question you wish more people would ask you, and how would you answer it?
Well, I'm bombarded with questions, so I'm not sure if there's a question I keep hoping people would ask me. And, but I think that the question I get so much is, how did your thinking change so you see life from such a different perspective? And which is, by the way, why I've written this book that's coming out called Mind Shift.
Yep.
And because what I wanted to do is I wanted to take people inside of the mental structures that I think have actually helped me design a life I love. Because one of the things I have found is that people have so many internal structures for failure, and they don't realize that their limitations are almost always internal. And I remember sitting with this guy who I guess he's like a CEO, and he was asking me, I have this other role I can step into. It's an incredible promotion, huge advancement for me, but I can't seem to get on the other side of this wall. And he kept saying, I just keep hitting this wall. And finally I said, all right, just take a moment and see your life on the other side of this wall. And it's ironically, this was at a bachelor party with like 12 men. And so I'm coaching there, and I said, do you see yourself on the other side of that wall? And he said, yes. And I said, do you want that life? And he goes, no. And I said, you need to realize that you are the wall. And he just goes, I'm the wall. And my experience is that most of the walls we hit, we're the wall. And so I do wish the question people would ask is, what are the internal limitations that I've accepted for myself? And which is why I wrote Mind Shift, and even just the subtitle of, you don't have to be a genius to think like one.
I love that. Yeah.
And some of it comes from the irony of my own life. I was in a psychiatric chair by the time I was 10 years old. I was a straight D student. I was told I was retarded. And then later in my life, now I travel the world. I'm introduced as a savant or a polymath or a genius. And I go, No one understands how funny that is. And my wife, who's been married to me for 40 years, literally said to me, "What happened to you?" She goes, every time I turn around, you're like someone I didn't know before.
Mm.
And I can tell you, Matt, I feel like the boundaries in my imagination were erased. Like the ceilings of my intellect were removed. And I know this is a internal journey that's available to everyone. I don't believe that there is genetic uniqueness in me in that sense. I believe that there is structural uniqueness because I've redesigned my inner world.
Mm.
And I just wish people would ask, how do I unlock my own genius? Because there's so much genius inside of every person that's being wasted. It's dormant, it's latent, it's waiting to be unlocked. And I feel like my life mission is to unlock the genius in every person.
I love that. We're going to make sure that Mind Shift is in the show notes of this episode. We'll have a link there, whether it be for pre-orders or when the book is released. So that will most definitely be in the show notes for everyone that's tuned in. I appreciated that. That was a beautiful sentiment you just shared. And I've been doing something new here. This is as we're coming to a close. I've been doing something new. It was a very creative idea I saw from Stephen Bartlett, and I said, you know what? I wanna start implementing it because I think it's a beautiful thing. I've been asking a past guest to ask our current guest, which is you, a question without knowing who is who. In fact, I'll tell you, the last guest that we had on the show was Ricky Williams, the former NFL running back who had a lot of hardships. He's absolutely fantastic, and he asked you a question without knowing who he was asking it to, and his question is, who is your favorite elder and why?
Elder?
Elder, correct.
Well, I mean, the first person that came to my mind was Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay,
And,
why is that?
I mean, obviously, I should say Jesus, right? Because I'm a follower of Jesus, right? But let me give you like an unexpected answer. And I think that I've spent most of my life feeling very alone in the world.
Okay.
And so I had to search through history to find friends and people that I could relate to and be inspired by. And I was inspired by Da Vinci because I felt like Da Vinci imagined what couldn't even be created because there wasn't enough technology to create what he could imagine. And so he imagines a submarine, generations before it was possible for it to exist, the helicopter before it was technologically possible for it to exist. And he doesn't have a lot of finished works of art, to be honest with you. I think he has like 5 or 6 finished works of art. But it seemed to me it was less important for him to finish a project than to unlock the possibilities of the impossible. And so from my childhood all the way through this point in my life, Da Vinci was always an inspiration for me. I studied his genius. I learned how to do things with both hands so I could activate both sides of my mind. I basically just tried to steal his approach toward unlocking genius and see how it affected my own life. So people like, Da Vinci are hugely influential in my life, and Picasso and, some of those other individuals. Yeah.
I love that. I was going to invite you to play basketball the next time you're here in New York City, but now that I know you could play with both hands, I don't know. I can't slide to the left as good as I used to, so my defense might not be as good. But the second part of that question is you asking a question to our next guest, and of course, without knowing who it is.
By the way, I love this. This is really good. And
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think what I want to ask your next guest is, what is the unexpected skill or competency that you had to learn to achieve your highest level of success?
Would your answer to that question be tearing yourself down internally and building yourself back up?
Well, I'm not going to answer your question because it's for the next guest.
Okay, there you go. No, I appreciate it. I want to let everyone, just a reminder that Mind Shift, Erwin's new book, in the show notes of this episode. Do you have anything else going on? You talked about the arena. Do we need to put that in the show notes as well? What's going on with that?
Talk about the arena. Yeah, this is the most fun I've had in years. Creating the arena, I think, is going to be a significant breakthrough space. We want to create a place where people from all over the world can connect together and focus on one. I want to raise up just a movement of world-class communicators. I think that we've lost the art of words and the art of communicating with power and strength and at human frequencies. I have this process called the 7 frequencies of communication, where I help people understand the communication frequency from which they are connecting to other people and how people listen through different frequencies. And I create content, but I hate selling. And so we thought, okay, why don't we create a space where we can put most cutting edge content on communication, leadership, character, personal growth, and make it accessible to people who are members. And so we're creating a membership space called The Arena, where if you want, to grow in leadership, communication, character. And then I was sitting down with my son, Aaron, who's 35, and saying, he's my business partner. And I said, but I want it to be also a place for big ideas. I want to talk about philosophy, theology, leadership, relationships, emotional health, psychological well-being, mental performance. I want to have AI. I want to talk about everything. And then he looked at me and he said, oh, you're talking about the arena. And where the gladiators come in and go to war. But it's like the mental gladiators. And so that's how we came up with the name. We're launching it in this August.
Awesome.
And it's going to be a space. And frankly, I coach people, but it's like a 6-figure space. And so most people can't afford that. And then I have masterminds that are, in that range from $30,000 to $50,000 a year, which is still fairly high end for a lot of people. And we wanted to create a space for people who were not at that level yet, but really wanted to access the kind of thinking that will help them elevate. And so the arena, I think, is going to be around $350 a month. And it's still, expensive for some people, but it'll be far more accessible to far many more. But I do know this, the people who actually grow, they understand the importance of investing in their growth. And so this is, for me, it's the new era of education. Frankly, you're not going to get this in high school. You're not going to get this in college. You're not going to get this at Harvard. You're not going to get this at Stanford. You're not going to get this at Berkeley, because they're not teaching you what you need to be successful in the new world. This, to me, is the future of education.
Absolutely. I love that. We're going to make sure that we have the arena in the show notes as well. I'm going to ask you one last question as I have you for a couple more minutes here. Erwin makes it to whatever year he wants to live to. Whatever it is. It could be you live till you're 250, who knows? Whatever it is, you impact as many people through your books or the arena or your speaking engagements, whatever the case is. But you can only be remembered for one piece of advice. It's the piece of advice that's etched into your tombstone. It's less of a legacy thing, but more of, Erwin just popped in my mind. This is what he taught me. What is that advice?
I just told someone I want on my tombstone, he has so much potential. Not he had, because we think of potential as a limited commodity. I actually think the more of your potential you access, the more potential you actually gain. And so this whole idea that you should die without any potential is such a myth. I want to die with so much potential that people wished I had lived longer.
So you're saying when you hit new levels of potential, it just continues to increase and increase and increase.
That's right. So I want to die with so much potential that the world feels the loss, because what would he have dreamed up next year?
I love that. Erwin, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to amplify this. Again, Mindshift, the arena, all in the show notes, socials, websites, all of that good stuff is there as well. But expressing gratitude. Thank you for this opportunity.
Hey, thank you so much, Matt. Take care.
I appreciate it.